short introduction, and then we should talk about Haleon.
Yeah, look, I'm Bart. I'm Chief Supply Chain Officer at Haleon. I just had one question. Who knows Haleon? Who knows what Haleon is? Okay, 40%, I guess. So look, let me take an opportunity to introduce you to Haleon with a short video. We're the newest company on the block. We're only 9 months old, but we're a big company with a substantial history. So just wanted to introduce Haleon to you first with a video.
Haleon, a new name focused on improving everyday health. Health. Strength. With a clear purpose. To deliver better everyday health with humanity. For billions of people around the world, everyday health matters. We believe that taking care of it should be easier, and that more humanity is the key to making it more achievable. More inclusive. And more sustainable. We have a restless desire to change everyday health for good, combining deep human understanding with trusted science and global reach, with exceptional category-leading brands, trusted by healthcare professionals, customers, and consumers. We always do the right thing, going beyond, doing what matters most, keeping it human, knowing that every improvement can have a positive impact. To deliver better everyday health with humanity.
I'll just do a couple of slides, Stefan, and then we can do a few questions.
Go for it.
I'm going to stand up because, look, just take the opportunity to introduce the company. And then obviously we're working very closely with O9 on a business transformation, which I think hopefully will be relevant to some of you. But we had a couple of slides. Hopefully those slides, you got them? Yeah. So look, we were listed on the stock exchange. We were the biggest listing in the last decade on both the UK and the US stock exchange. And we're an £11 billion company with basically the biggest everyday health company on the planet. And so we have Sensodyne through to Advil, through to Voltaren. And you can see that the brands that we operate in, we're number one in therapeutic oral health, which is basically Sensodyne, Parodontax, those types of products. We're number one in pain relief. We have the top 5 brands in the top 10 of the world of pain relief, Voltaren, Panadol, Advil, Excedrin. These are all brands that make a huge difference to pain relief for consumers every day. We're the number one vitamin supplements brand in Centrum across the world. And they're some of the key brands that we deliver on. So better everyday health, delivering to consumers something that I think makes a huge difference to them every day. We're an £11 billion business. We believe that the things that make a difference to us and allow us to grow are all about trusted science, which is delivering scientific value. Sensodyne genuinely delivers for a third of people who suffer from sensitivity. It genuinely delivers a solution for making your teeth less sensitive to cold and hot food. And so it makes a huge difference through trusted science, which is uniquely differentiated. And we think we understand consumers' pain, consumers' everyday health better than everybody else. We put those two together. That makes a huge difference, I think. And look, we've come from 3 different histories. GSK, Novartis, and Pfizer all had a consumer business, which was a very small part of a bigger pharma company. And we put them together and created Haleon. And you can imagine the transformation. It was interesting to hear the Avon story and what happened through COVID. We had also a kind of a transformation through the process of COVID where we became and listed ourselves as a brand new company. So we had COVID on steroids in terms of the changes that were happening through that time. So going from a pharmaceutical based way of working to a FMCG based way of working was really the transformation that we were looking to do, and collaborating on an end-to-end platform to do that was absolutely critical. So that's why we partnered with O9, and we're in the middle of that transformation journey, at least in our IBP and end-to-end platform story. So that's a bit of the context. I'm going to leave that slide, and we're going to perhaps go into some more Q&As. Thank you, Steph.
Let's do it. And by the way, to the audience, Bart, you're doing an amazing job presenting the company, but it's not just a sales pitch. My wife is a dentist, and she's recommending Sensodyne to all her patients. I guess...
Thank you, Stefan. Great. We use O9, you use Sensodyne. We'll take that.
There you go. Hopefully we don't need any pain relief today. But Bart, thanks for being here. Clearly supply chains are important, or are actually increasingly becoming important for the boardroom. And I think that is really interesting. That also came up during our event, our virtual event a couple of weeks ago. Tell us a little bit more about that. What are you observing, based on your participation in boardroom discussions, especially when it comes to supply chain?
Great question. And look, you can imagine we're a new company. So we just created a new board, actually, which is headed up, the chairman is Dave Lewis, who used to be the CEO of Tesco's. And they're a new board with a new company. So all the questions that you can imagine, a new bunch of people want to know about the company. But the first thing that they ask for is, how are you going to grow this business, and how can supply chain be an enabler for growth? And that's what I think Gustavo was also talking about. It's really, how can you be the enabler for growth and support the business? We are a growth story. How do you make sure that that happens? And how do you plan for all the potential eventualities that you need to be ready for to support that growth? And you can imagine in our world, it was interesting. I mean, so many examples, but one great example, China came out of COVID. Did anybody predict that China were going to come out of COVID in the way they did? One day to the next, suddenly it was right. We're going to unlock the whole country from being on 3 years of complete lockdown. Our products, which matter, really, really do matter for consumers in that world, grew by 4,000% in 3 weeks. How do you plan for that eventuality? How do you ready for that eventuality? Maybe not 4,000%, but being ready for those things that could happen to your products and seeing what might happen, I think, is what the board are asking us to do more and more, and making sure that you're ready for those scenario planning and that you've got anticipation of what that looks like, and that you're making choices about what that looks like. So should I have capacity for 4,000%? Probably not. But should I have capacity for a potential growth of 300%? Probably yes. What's the cost of that versus the opportunity that that creates, and how do you balance those two things? That's, I think, the board conversation that is really important.
Thanks for sharing that, Bart, and definitely a good discussion topic. And 4,000%, that's a lot.
That was
hopefully that has stabilized a little bit more. Now we're talking about digital transformation a lot. I would love to get your perspective in terms of what are actually the constraints that are hindering companies to accelerate their digital transformation to ultimately achieve value.
Yeah, look, and we've talked about it, I think, at some of the sessions earlier today. I think it's our own self-limitation, actually, is the constraint. I think clearly there's data and what it takes to get your data right to be able for the system to do the right thing. But fundamentally, I think there is a desire amongst the leaders of the business and the operators who run the demand planning and supply planning every day to want to be different and want to make change. And I think if you can do change management with both incentivizing and being clear that it's an expectation, I think that's what's going to make the difference to transformation. And then all the mechanical issues of, I can't get the right data, I can't get it in the right way, the system doesn't completely work the way I want it to work. Those things, I think, can be resolved through that process. So I think creating a really engaging reason for change is probably the thing that's going to make the biggest difference.
Makes total sense. And actually, when you started answering the question, you touched upon data. And I think data is such an important topic. I think what we are finding, with Haleon, but in general, is that companies, they don't lack data. They actually have access to a vast amount of data. However, there's also a lot of important data that's sort of stuck in Excel spreadsheets in the heads of the people. We normally categorize this as tribal knowledge. And a lot of that tribal knowledge is extremely important for planning and decision making today. What are you finding in that area, and what do you believe are sort of the opportunities for technology to help you systematizing a lot of the data that's out there but not incorporated into planning today?
Love it. And I think for me, the biggest thing on data is to be clear about what you're going to use the data for.
Yeah.
And make sure that you create the data lake or the infrastructure to support the data you need for a business project that you're going to deliver value with, rather than create data for the sake of data. And so we've been very deliberate about, here's a project, here's a business approach, here's the business benefit. Now this is the data we need to deliver on that solution. And so I think that firstly really matters in terms of using the data and being clear about what you need it for. And then clearly having a clear set of domains, particularly on product data, and being structured about the data set that you need. And you can imagine we've come from 3 different companies, Novartis, GSK, and Pfizer. Everybody had a different set of hierarchies for all of their products. You can imagine that integrating that into one solution for Haleon, you've all been through, I think, integrations, but that's been a job to be done. And we're still on the process of being clear about our architecture. And that is fundamental to making sure that you have a planning system that's effective. Yeah. So we're in the process of doing that in parallel to implementing the kind of platform solution for O9.
Totally. Yeah. And I think reflecting on what we are seeing with a lot of organizations is like planning data, like, what are your build ahead and build late policies, right? What are your inventory policies? What are your lead times? What are the manufacturing constraints? We're finding that a lot of that data is not necessarily systematized, and I think that's definitely an opportunity for technology to now once and for all bring that all together, but also in a way that you can systematize it in an efficient way going forward, so that you don't have to go through a big data cleansing activity every year. I want to pivot from data to AI, right? I mean, Financial Times, Wall Street Journal, it's all about ChatGPT, generative AI, you name it. What are you currently seeing as potential use cases when it comes to AI and supply chain? Yeah. And thoughts that you have in terms of discussions that are going on at Haleon?
Yeah, and look, we're working with you on I think, a very interesting proposition, and we tried to do this through COVID, but how do you predict the 4,000%? How do you work out whether the 4,000% is going to happen? And through COVID, it was interesting. We were trying to predict the flu season. You can imagine flu has a huge impact on our product portfolio. So we're trying to say, well, how many people in which area of the world have... So firstly, you're trying to say, where in the US or where in Europe is there going to be a flu epidemic, if you like? Where is it going to be the worst? And how can I, within 6 weeks time horizon, make sure my product is where it needs to be in the country, i.e. in the right DC for where the most flu season will be, because it's very regional. It's not just it's very regional. So how do you predict that? What are the mechanisms using Google to understand how many people are searching for flu, to understanding how many people are wearing masks and how many people aren't wearing masks, to understand all the variables that deliver on a different flu season? That's a 6-week horizon. Then there's a kind of 6-month horizon, which is, well, what's happening in Australia? Can Australia predict the future for the Western world on flu season? What are the other dynamics in terms of what's the immunity level of people, and how do you bring all those things together into an AI platform that allows you to predict 6 months ahead? And then there's, how do you predict 3 years ahead what the kind of general trend on the flu season is, and what are the variables and dynamics that allow you to predict that? So the whole thing about epidemics, flu seasons, we've all become some kind of experts on epidemiology, but being able to predict and see what the variables are and using technology to help you predict those variables and then do scenario planning around them is probably, I think, one of the biggest things that we need the technology to help us enable. Yeah.
Totally. No, and a great use case for sure. Now, one of the things that we discussed a couple of weeks ago at our big global event, and Vikram Agarwal, the group CEO of Danone, he was very clear about that. He said, before you embark on any digital transformation journey, you better be clear on the business value that should deliver and how you're going to measure that. What's your perspective of that related to the situation at Haleon?
Couldn't agree more. I mean, look, we put a business case together. We got it approved by the board. Clearly, the board aren't going to approve anything without being really clear about the net revenue gain, the inventory reduction, the profit gain, and clearly there are also some opportunities to be more efficient in the way we do our supply and planning. So it's fundamental to creating that business case and creating the investment for change. So couldn't agree more. And we are tracking it every quarter in terms of the business value that we're then getting as we move through the integrations in our first 3 countries. So, yeah.
And maybe as a follow-up question on that, because obviously there is a planning transformation, but, Haleon is, embarking on many more transformations. On top of that, there is the, market dynamics. So how do you sort of measure the true impact of, let's say, this transformation versus some of the others?
Yeah, that's really tough. And look, we've got clarity on the metrics that we will drive, both holistically and then the specific ones that this transformation will deliver on. And being clear about those two is important, but sometimes there are multiple things that clearly impact OTIF or clearly impact net revenue growth. So you've got to try and distinguish them as best you can.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks for that. Now, let's talk a little bit about ESG. I know, you're a big proponent of that. I know Haleon is, but also some of your brands like Sensodyne and so forth actively sort of promote, the ESG factor of their brand. One of the things that we are seeing is that companies today are still struggling in bringing some of those ESG metrics into planning and decision making. What are you finding in terms of the challenges on one side and the opportunities on the other side of incorporating that into decision making? And what is Haleon doing in addressing those?
Yeah, look, first and foremost, I think reducing our impact on the planet is the thing that matters most. So, we've got recyclable toothpaste tubes, and how do we make sure they get recycled? How do we go to cartonless toothpaste tubes? How do we make sure that we produce the product at lower temperature so that we have less impact on the environment? Those types of things are the things that are meaningful and matter most. But then, in order to change anything, the thing that matters most is you can measure that you're changing something. We just said that. How do you create a business case? How do you measure the business case? So on sustainability, that also really matters. And I think having the infrastructure and the technology to allow you to measure both scope 1, 2, and 3. Scope 1 and 2, pretty easy. Scope 3, I'm sure we're all having the same challenge. How do you measure scope 3 accurately so that you can measure the difference that you're making? And I think that's both with contract manufacturers and with suppliers. And so being able to have a simple data set that doesn't make you restricted in your ability to be agile and go at pace, but gives you enough data to allow you to measure the impact that you're having, particularly on scope 3, which is where, you need suppliers to really be able to interface with you in a simple way and then aggregate the data for Haleon that makes a difference.
Totally.
So absolutely using technology to do that.
I think what we are seeing, Bart, is that with a lot of our clients where we have fully deployed, let's say, the digital twin of the supply chain, right? Historically, what do we model, right? We model your DCs, manufacturing sites, warehouses, suppliers, and so forth. But the focus has always been on the constraints, manufacturing constraints, logistics constraints, you name it, and, related cost components to understand the cost to serve and understand whether you can support that amount or not. I think what we are now seeing is that companies are looking into how can I use that same digital twin to incorporate ESG metrics, whether that's electricity, water consumption, carbon, and so forth. And then companies are then embarking on a journey to collaborate with suppliers. Today, that's mostly around, I send a forecast, I want to commit. Okay, the next step is, can I actually collaborate on inventory or capacity or materials? And I think now the awareness is increasing that actually that same technology can be leveraged. We just need to start modeling the ESG metrics. Now, it is a journey. But I do believe, we should start and sort of build out that digital twin with ESG metrics, and definitely something we should talk on more.
100%. It's going to be hugely important in the next 10 years, and being able to measure that impact.
And especially being a European company, even more important. Yeah. Excellent. Now, Bart, those were my questions, but I wanted to actually, have the audience ask you a couple of questions as well. Colin, and then we break for some coffee.
Thank you. Given that you mentioned that you're early in the journey, but you're 2 to 3 months late at the moment, how are you handling that with the board? Are you receiving pressure to go early before you're ready, or are you being encouraged to get it right first time? And has that been?
No, we're actually committing to getting back on time. So I mean, it's 2 or 3. There's a specific issue, but we're committing to get back on time, and I think we can. So that conversation with the board isn't one of kind of we're late. It's one of we've got a slightly different phasing.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so Bart, thanks for being with us here today, and very much enjoyed the conversation, and thanks for the partnership.
Yeah.
And to everyone, we'll break. We're back at 10:30 for our next couple of sessions, and looking forward to connecting with all of you. Cheers.
Thank you.
Thank you all.